Hey guys, Ash here again at Flight Sim Reviews, and today I just want to do an interior review of the Lotus Simulations L-39C Albatros. This is a really great add-on aircraft for FSX. It is payware, and it has a pretty good cockpit, so let's get started. First off, the cockpit looks really nice. The interior color is really nice. The gray they used isn't harsh on the eyes, and it actually looks pretty realistic. Some of the switches are non-functional in this cockpit, so within a reasonable time amount I'm going to go through this here with you guys, but of course I can't get to everything, so let's start down here on the left. You of course have an oxygen supply, which is functional on this aircraft. For your mask, I do not know what this controls for. It is non-functional. These are also nothing more than a 2D skin here. They don't do anything as well as this. The fuel shut-off is functional. The pitot heat is functional. These switches are not. These are intercom switches for your headsets. No reason for those to be functional. The shoulder harness release is non-functional. And then we get over to our actual engine management switches. This is your APU stop switch. If you had a fire or needed to shut down the APU, this is how you do it. This is your APU start switch for the Saphira APU. The APU on this jet actually cannot provide power. It only provides start air for the main turbine. So the aircraft is on batteries until the main turbine is lit. This is a start mode switch, so if you're hot, start, etc., you could change the starting mode. That does not work, unfortunately. I'm not sure that it really needs to. You know, if you have a hot start in FSX, you just really normally start again like you normally would. Not very many add-on aircraft simulate all that properly. The engine stop switch, so that's if you want to go ahead and cut the engine for any reason. Emergency fuel switch. There's two settings on the instrument lights. There's a red and a white setting, so depending if you're at night or dawn or dusk, whichever you prefer. Fire discharge for the bottles. The AI-25 turbine that is in this aircraft actually can overheat, believe it or not, so it does not have sufficient cooling to run it full in one speed. So the engine will actually build temperature if you run it hard for a long period of time, and the aircraft does have an auto cutoff system if the pilot is taking the EGT out of range. So there's a switch that can actually override that function. An engine vibration switch, which is functional to test the gauge, and your turbine start switch for once the APU's started. And you have all your switches for your flaps, fully functional, and your speed brake switch on your throttle, and the throttle is actually animated pretty well, and there's a stop position. You want to make sure it's not in that if you're trying to start. Anyways, guys, going to the main panel, you have a G switch, or a G indicator, excuse me, for positive and negative G forces on the aircraft. You have +8, -4 that the airframe can take on the gauge, and there's actually little hands that will come out and show you your max you've pulled, and this switch resets them. There's a standard clock with a start and stop reset function, gear position indicators, and there's also a speed brake indicator here. Your landing gear handle, pretty standard stuff. It's kind of nice. It actually functions. A little red collar on it. It goes into the slot where you would expect it to. Warning system test. Going to the top, there is smoke on this aircraft. I think it's Control-I on the keyboard on FSX to do that, but if you want to use this aircraft in aerobatics on multiplayer, of course you're free to do that. And the smoke switch is right there. All types of warning lights. This is the Garmin GNS 430, obviously, for FSX. It is Reality XP compatible. I don't use Reality XP, but if you do, it is compatible with this add-on. Your airspeed indicators here. You'll notice it's a little different than most airspeed indicators, as it tops out at 120 knots. It is in clicks, it's in kilometers, so your airspeed works a little different if you're used to flying with knots with most other aircraft. And there is a Mach meter on a secondary needle here. You have an artificial horizon, and it's a Russian artificial horizon, so the airplane shows you your wings level here, and then the back moves up and down. So the rear element in this actually does not rotate. It just goes up and down, so for positive and negative pitch. The only thing that rolls is this little airplane piece, and 15, 30, 45 are marked for your roll rate. Of course, a VSI, vertical rate, obviously, and there's another turn coordinator in here. It's not necessarily a turn coordinator, it's actually a backup roll indicator, so that's a little different, and your turn coordinator. Standard altimeter here, which the aircraft actually did not use if it was a Russian version. They had their own trick altimeter, but they switched it to just a standard altimeter, so it's easier. We'll go ahead and get rid of the stick. Pretty standard gyroscopic compass. It works a little differently than if you're used to just a standard OBS. The line's broken here, and you can see it also gives you your ILS information in the center, so that's a little different. This is something for calibrating the altimeter, to my knowledge. If you're in an Eastern Bloc country, you may not have ATIS with your barometric pressure, so this was a way to calibrate your altimeter. It's non-functional here. Of course, this is just a standard VOR Omni. You can roll the OBS, pretty standard there. And this is your DME in this aircraft. It's measured in clicks, as is the airspeed. So if you're on a VOR, ADF, etc., you can get your DME right there. This is your engine panel. That's why it's differentiated here with the black. You have your N1, and there's an N2 needle as well underneath. This is your EGT, hundredths of Celsius. So again, as I was saying, this turbine can actually overheat. That being said, the red line is where the intervene system will actually cut the turbine and allow it to cool. So you never want to exceed that point, and you will get warnings as it gets hotter on the lights. Just standard oil temp, oil pressure, fuel flow here, and this is your fuel gauge. The plane does draw off the tip tanks and the externals first, and then it draws off the internal. Unfortunately, when the wing tanks and the tip tanks are full, 800 kilos is your max fuel. You can see we're at like 825 kilos here, which means the tip tanks and the external tanks are full. So actually, this plane does not show external tank fuel levels. You just know they're exhausted once this gauge starts to move. It means it's burning out of the tip tanks or the wing tanks. Pressurization, differential, pretty standard stuff there. It's all automated in this aircraft. It only pressurizes up so high, and then the pilot breathes oxygen, so it's not a fully pressurized cabin per se. Engine vibration and voltage and amp meter, so standard stuff there. Moving down. Now this is actually a flare release, colored flares. If you lose your radio, some air forces use these to communicate. White flare means one thing, red means another. And a master switch. Unfortunately, it's non-functional, so not going to be launching any flares in FSX. These are non-functional. These are for actually arming weapon stations. Fire test, master arm, and salvo mode. Again, I fly a lot of combat simulators, so I'm not going to get into all that. None of this is functional here in this area. These are aileron and elevator neutral position indicators, so if your trim's neutral on either, these will light. And then here is your actual trim indicator here. This aircraft does not have nose wheel steering. You differential brake, and so this will show your right brake pressure and your left brake pressure and your emergency brake pressure, which we have none because the turbine is not spinning, so there's no hydraulic pressure. This is your seal for your pressurization once the canopy's closed. battery, generators, avionics, engine gauges, that's all here. I'll go through it when we do an engine start. It's pretty nice how this aircraft's configured, so everything's right there in one area. That's pretty handy. Moving on, there's a cabin heat switch and seat unlock, etc. That is not functional, though the anti-ice, auto, and manual is functional. The aircraft does have full icing effects, so you will see the windscreen ice up. Air conditioning switch is non-functional, obviously. Nav light, strobes, beacon, all functional. All the switches work, and the radios are all functional. You do not turn the knobs. You mouse over the numbers and roll your mouse wheel or click to set your different frequencies. And then this is your emergency hydraulic pressure systems. If you lose hydraulic pressure for whatever reason, these are your backup systems, so to provide hydraulic pressure in case of emergency. And of course your circuit breakers over here. So I hope that gave you a good look at the cockpit of the L-39 Albatros. I have not covered the rear cockpit. I think I'll probably do that in the flight portion, just show it off to you. It just has a lot, it's very Spartan. I'll give you a quick look at it if you want. It just is basically for training of a new pilot. They can turn off the pitot-static systems or hydraulic systems, and they can turn off gauges and confuse the pilot and see how he reacts. Strange thing is, though, you do have to select which EGT gauge you want running. The plane can't power the one in the rear and the front. It doesn't matter really, though. The plane isn't rated for rear seat flight anyways, due to the fact most of the stuff's up front, the controls, your generator and all that. You can't start it from the back. Pretty cool. It's just more, all this is functional back here, which is nice, so you can, and this plane actually supports 2 people flying, so you can have a guy in the front and a guy in the back if you want, playing around. So anyways, that's pretty cool, and not very many FSX aircraft do that. So anyways, I hope that gave you a really good look at the interior of the L-39, and next we'll go ahead and start her up and move on to the other reviews I do on these aircraft. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to PM me or leave a comment in the comments box, and don't forget to subscribe. Again, I appreciate all my subscribers. You're why I do this. So I hope you stay tuned for more flights and reviews, and thanks again.